Prosperity in Black America. What will this require? Is Black business prospering? Are we reaching women and minority-owned businesses? How do we achieve earning parity for wealth for our families? Do our children really have access to education? Will our families have choices for our children? Prison pipelines, mass incarceration, tearing our families apart. A healthcare system not accessible to the masses. The disproportionate termination of Black women from corporate America. When will we actually begin to address what's really at play? How do Black people gain more power to help make these changes? This requires a lot of political will and courage. I'm that provocateur of change. I am Cindi Bright. Welcome to HeartBeat. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to HeartBeat. I am your host, Cindi Bright. Thank you for joining tonight. How do we give Black people power to help change what's going on around us? You heard that in my intro this evening. Every week we talk about prosperity for Black America, but gaining power, getting political power is what is necessary for us as Black people to be able to help change this system. Now, you hear week after week, we talk about a range of issues and different things that are necessary for us. But one of the issues we haven't yet talked about that I think you're going to find really fascinating and interesting is, what does it take to be able to run for political office when it comes to earning parity to be able to serve in those seats? Now, let me say that different. Many people, what the wages are for people to run for political office or serve is very little pay. If you think about, when my guest introduces herself this evening, when you serve on some of these city council or these school boards or in the state legislature, you know, the wages in the state legislature are roughly 50-something thousand a year. Maybe at the bottom end of 60, something in that regard. But in some of the city council races and some of the quote unquote smaller cities, they're not making a lot of money, and they are out here in our communities serving us every day and trying to help move things forward for us. And so brown and Black people have not necessarily been able to step into these kind of seats, because who can actually afford to work for $1,200 a month in some of these cases where there's just no money? There's no money there. And so it's actually an ecosystem that is designed and is actually keeping us out because we can't afford to work for that. And in fact, you know, one could argue that you have to be white or wealthy to be able to serve in office. And that's why many people are not going up against or trying to challenge some of these seats, is to be able to afford to live. Now, when I looked at some of the studies around earning parity here in the Seattle area in order to afford to live here, I've seen two different data points. One is, you know, to afford rent here in the Seattle area, you have to make $44 an hour, which annualizing that comes to about $91,000 a year. And I've seen another study that shows you have to make $64 an hour, which brings your salary to $133,000 a year. So if you think about, you know, that is an annual salary for people just to be able to afford rent here. And you try to annualize it based on how many hours the city councils are working, or how many, you know, those are probably pretty variable depending on the needs in the community. But you have to start to ask these questions about the barrier to entry, the barrier to be able to get into these seats and actually make a living or pay you something decent. Our guest tonight is the chair of the 48th district, which is Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond. And the city of Redmond is doing something that is actually unique and interesting. And some people may shake their heads and think, you know, who's paying attention to Redmond? It's in the suburbs. Redmond's actually, when you look at their annual budgets, it's like $1 billion right now. So they're not as small as we think they are. And it is worthy of us to pay attention to what our guest and that district is doing around pay equity. Let me introduce in the chair of the 48th district. I'm going to let her introduce herself in to you. Let's bring her in now. Lisa Weber. Lisa, welcome to HeartBeat, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself in this evening.
Thank you, Cindy. ASEAN, Ice Kuchil, Lisa Weber, Senisna, Saamish. Good evening to respected people that are viewing this. And I am letting you know that my name is Lisa Weber and I am Samish. Our historical territory is what is now known as the San Juan Islands in the United States, and then further north through the islands continuing. My tribe was split by the 49th parallel. And I would love to thank Cindi for inviting me tonight to be able to represent my district and the values that we hold and the things that we've been doing and things that have been happening in Redmond to help us try to form an ecosystem where there's some equity in politics. Thank you.
Yeah, Lisa, it's no secret to those of the people who know that I ran in this district. And so the 48th district is my home. I would just say, I'll put it that way. And the district has always been kind of in the forefront of challenging the status quo when it comes to how things are done. In fact, I've seen the district be fairly rebellious when they are being trying to be pushed and put into their place in terms of how you're thinking about progressing things and progressing candidates and what you guys have been doing to try to help get brown and black people elected into office. Can you maybe start off by giving us an overview of what the city of Redmond has done in terms of it embarking on engaging a salary commission to take a look at the salaries that the Redmond City Council is now receiving? Like, take us through that whole process of what started this. Um, just take us all through this whole gamut of information.
Well, I'll start back with uh, the last Washington State convention. There was a party platform, and in that platform, LD 48 wanted to get our legislators and our city council members and our school board members paid equitably. And whatever that is, like, we didn't set a number, but we felt that this was something that needed to be looked into. So that's the value in my LD, and that did get as far as getting some more pay equity for legislators. Those were the only things mentioned in a 52 or so page party platform that were accepted by the Democrats at the time. Then there's a statute in Redmond and probably most cities, but in Redmond, there's a statute. It's a law that every 4 years, the salaries of the city council members need to be evaluated by a independent salary commission. And what happens is the city council calls for this commission to be formed. And then because Redmond is a strong mayor system, meaning that their mayor is elected separately than their city council members to run the city, to basically be the CEO, the COO of the city. The mayor and her staff put that request on a website for Redmond City, and then they have people that volunteer to be on this commission, and the mayor and their staff decide who will be the 7 members on that commission. And that is a lot. They have to do this every 4 years. So the 48th managed to get 3 of the 7 city council members appointed to that position. And 2 of those members are pretty new and weren't even around when we were talking about our platform for the last state convention. But they're both younger gentlemen under 35. And then also our vice chair, who is an immigrant from India and been living in this area about 30 years. So those 3 were on the commission. And also the chair of the 45th was on that commission. And then there was a young person, Uthman Arakhani, and he had never been involved in politics, but he's been working at Amazon a little over 3 years. He's young, and he decided he wanted to get engaged civically with Redmond because he grew up there and he's living there. So they, along with 2 people, one who never came to one meeting, and a young woman that came to 2 or 3 meetings, basically were the bulk of the 7 members. And they were sworn into office on March 3rd, and they literally had, by statute, until March 31st to make the decision of what they thought the city councilors should get paid. And what's really interesting is whatever their decision is, it's binding. They give it to the city clerk, and the mayor doesn't get to say it's right or wrong. The city council doesn't get to say it's right or wrong. It is binding. And the only way to change it is to have a referendum. And that gives the citizens of Redmond 30 days to get 10% of the voters to sign a referendum to put it on the salary on the next election vote. So
Now,
that's
it's my understanding when you talked about, the people who were on the commission, so you had a pretty diverse group of people, and
yes,
they put together, I actually watched the presentation, so they put together a very comprehensive view on how they looked at the salary structures and what the salary structure should be and what their recommendations are. And so
yes.
can you take us through a little bit of like, what were their determinants? Or I know we did try to get somebody from the commission on, and, Chandra, bless his heart, is sick tonight, so I do wanna wish him well tonight because I know he's fighting some
Yes.
illness tonight. Um, but they did go through this an actual process to look at, what would be the, fair wage, to give to the council members in Redmond, and they arrived at, what was the figure, like
I believe it's $78,000 a year, and I can tell you how they arrived there. It's going to the end of the story,
okay.
but basically what that was is they had by the last meeting they had 4 proposals between $60,000 and $110,000 a year. And $110,000 a year was basically that median wage that you need to be able to afford rent in Redmond. So whatever that is, whether it's $55 or not, that added up full time to be about $110,000 a year in Redmond. Then there was the $60,000 a year, and then there was one that was give them half the wage of what the mayor's making, and then add $20,000 to that so they can buy their benefits. And then that ended up being like $96,000. And then the one that they actually arrived at was $78,000. And this was arrived at because they were allowed to do a survey of this current city council members and find out about how long they were spending each work week doing what they needed to do for city council. And that average was about 24 hours from from 5, I believe, of the 7 city council members that responded, 24 hours a week. So they took the mayor's wage right now, which is $145,000. She gets additional money for car allowance and things. And what they thought would be a reasonable increase in her salary, which was $170,000 a year. They took an average of those 2 numbers, and they multiplied it by 0.60 because that was the percentage that they'd be working at 24 hours a week. And they added a little bit extra to that to help offset the cost of the benefits that they are not included in their salary, but are included in the mayor's salary to arrive around $78,000.
And was there a factor? So a couple things that you said that I want to make sure we go through. One is that there was an additional premium that was considered for them to be able to purchase health insurance. So are city council members working without insurance benefits?
Yes, if they want any benefits, they have to purchase them themselves. And
And
right
is
now, yeah,
and is the mayor receiving benefits through her salary?
yes.
And you said that her salary was 145,000.
With about a $10,000 car allowance.
Mm-hmm. And a benefit load on, here's my HR stuff, a benefit
Yes,
load on a
probably close to
salary.
220,000.
Yeah, I was going to say, and what was it she was trying to raise her salary to?
$210,000 a year
So
from 120.
with a benefit load for that, it would take her closer to 300,000. And is she opposing the salaries that the city council?
Yes.
Okay. Um, The reason why this is important, why I really wanted to talk about this and air this conversation in this show, is because this is what I'm going to characterize to be the typical playbook of what is happening to people. Two things. One, when certain people get into positions of power, what they aim to do is to keep themselves increasing and keep the people below them down. And so I actually talk about that in my book. I talk about the fact that this is how wealth is being built by some people. And in this case, this is a white woman mayor in Redmond who, from Cindy Bright's perspective, is following the playbook of white women America, which is oppress the people around her. And she continues to gain more money and more power. And so what you're saying is that the city council has swung back, right? There's a phrase somebody shared with me one time about you don't get to swing at people and then tell people how hard to punch back. And so council is saying, look, we're working X amount of hours, even though I could make a strong argument personally that this is an exempt level job, not a non exempt where you shouldn't have to worry about hours. It's about outcomes. And in exempt level positions, hours really don't matter. So I could actually make an argument that they should receive the full 100 and whatever thousand that was benchmark. That's issue number one. And issue number two is, in corporate America, the revenue of the business is a factor into how decisions are made about what the earning power should be of the council. And so, or of anybody, right? When you have that's part of the benchmark in coming up with salary decisions. And then there's compression issues and a whole lot of HR stuff that goes on. Long-winded way of saying, what is happening now that they have said, okay, $78,750 is what the salary is going to be? She decommissioned that group, correct?
Before they could have their final meeting, yes. And she actually tried. So when they were sworn in March 3rd, they were given the dates that were every other week on Thursdays to meet. And by the time it came to the second to last meeting, which would have been about mid-April, a couple days before the meeting, staff informed them that that meeting was canceled. And the reason they gave was not a good one. I'm just going to say, I don't even remember if I even know what it was. And then they tried to completely sideline the commission and not give them a chance to hold another meeting, because one of the bylaws is the council, the salary commission had an email chain with the staff and could request a meeting and a meeting date. And then it has to be put on the website of the city 24 hours before the meeting took place. And this happened, I believe, 2 or 3 times, and the city refused to publish on their website that there was going to be a meeting. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, any meeting they had would not have been legal, and they did not meet. And now come to find out, they did finally get the city attorney involved on a chain. And when they requested a time for their second to last meeting, and the city attorney was included on the emails, somehow the staff found that it was okay and that they could put them on, and it literally only gave them about 24-hour notice. Mm-hmm. That yes, they could have this meeting that they'd been requesting for 7 days.
Mm-hmm. One of our listeners, I'm just going to re-show her comments. Elizabeth is commenting about, when there are marginalized groups and there's this whole subgroup, there's often a betrayal in terms of how this actually shakes itself out. And I think what she's saying is this is typical behavior. And this kind of behavior is what I feel like may not necessarily be recognized on how this is oppressing other people, may or may not. But and number two, when you challenge this kind of power, when you challenge somebody who wants to take their salary from 145,000 to close to 300, but dismantle the group that's looking at the equity for other people. This just happens to be falling out in Redmond, but this is applicable to all areas of councils and other positions. And I actually think that this is the fight that we have to take on from a state perspective in order to get equity and in order to get people in a position of power so we can start making changes or advocating for changes in this system. Would you agree with that?
Well, exactly. I mean, if we cannot have change in one of the richest cities in King County, where I believe the population's around 80,000 people, and don't quote me on that because I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that their budget is over $1 billion a year. And I know that Cairo 7 News tried to equate them to a city the size of Marysville. But I don't think Marysville budget is even anywhere near $1 billion a year. So if we can't bring equity to a city that has a huge budget in a very rich area where the current salary for city council members is $18,800 a year. And if you have to buy your own benefits, you literally have one city council member taking home $1 from every paycheck. If we can't bring equity to the wealthy areas, how can we expect to bring them to the non-wealthy areas? Though I would like to say, can I just say that in this pursuit of looking for equity in salaries, the Salary Commission did find out that the city of Bellingham, with less than a $400 million budget, does pay their city councilors, I believe, around $67,000 a year. And that could have gone up a little with inflation. But when it started, that was basically what you needed to afford rent in Bellingham at the median wage there.
So this is not an anomaly. There's other cities are seeing the need to do this.
Absolutely. And also, I would say that in our research, we found about 50% of the city councils around the United States get paid, and about 50% do not. It could be like different statistics, but it wasn't an anomaly for cities in other states to get paid. But I will tell you, Chandra did share this, is that when they sat down that first day to that first meeting, the staff told them to just look and see what the cities around Redmond were paying their city councils. And that includes a Sammamish with a population of 67,000 people, but a very, very, very small budget because they don't have a lot of businesses there, to Bellevue, who has a budget well over $1 billion. I can't even quote you what it is, but I did talk to a Bellevue City Council member last night who said, I don't know what it is exactly, but it's way over $1 billion. And in Bellevue, they get $25,000 a year for basically a full-time job. And one of the things I've heard from griping from city councilors is they get elected, they think it might be a part-time job, and maybe they're retired, maybe their kids are grown up, so they work 40 hours a week at a job, but they're like, I can put in 10 hours a week, I can put in 15 hours a week, and they realize that even if they put in 20 to 30 hours a week in Redmond, Bellevue, or Kirkland, they cannot dig into seeing like any transparency in what's going on. They can only trust in the city staff and what the city staff like decides to share with them for like a couple pages at the beginning of a 500-page document. And I will say in this area, there are a lot of privileged people sitting on our councils that want to see some transparency in their budgets, and they want a full staff, a city council that's paid to do their job. And the city council is there to allocate the budget, right? And if they aren't given the chance or the time to do any digging, if they think something doesn't seem right and they're weak and the city staff doesn't want to help them, then they are in trouble.
I'm curious, Lisa, when you talked about, and again, for our audience, we did attempt to get a couple of the members of the Salary Commission on to speak with us. So I realize this is a secondhand question to ask, but Chandra is the chair was he the chair of that commission?
He was not.
Okay. What was Chandra's role? Because I want to
Chandra.
go ahead.
So Chandra was a person who, he applied and they put him on that commission. And even though he knew three of the other people there, um, they and he wanted to be chair because Chandra came to this country from Hyderabad 30 years ago, when Hyderabad was very small, from a fairly lower middle class background in India. But he's a finance guy. He was working at Microsoft,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he's been a small business owner for years. And he understands budgets and he understands finances. And he really wanted to be the chair, but there was pushback from that committee from other Democrats who hold positions of power and happen to not be immigrants and not be people of color, that maybe one of them could do it better.
And are you comfortable to share what you believe his experience to have been on this
Well,
commission?
he told me he felt that he didn't, they told him he wasn't being polite and that he was yelling. When he wasn't yelling, he was speaking loudly. So when you are from maybe a community that isn't white, maybe the people speak louder, right? Maybe that's just a cultural thing. I mean, I know it is for some of my relatives. And so I'm just going to say that he felt that he was being policed even by his allies as, not having the right demeanor. And they weren't necessarily going on ability but perception.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I did want to share that because he did share that with me, and he's very happy that they were able to finally work together. But another thing that the staff did is the staff weaponized the system, and so they literally scared the people on the commission so much that they didn't even feel comfortable talking to each other outside the commission on things that had nothing to do with the commission. When
Who's
all
who scared
people,
them?
the staff from Redmond that were in every meeting they were in, they literally said that if they were to talk amongst each other in a quorum, they would be breaking laws and they could be sued. There could be legal process brought against them. And I do hope the LD48 has put this presentation that one of the people from the commission gave us on our website under our resolutions part of the LD40, I think it's ld48dems.org website. And so if you just go to resolutions from the top menu, the very first thing is you can watch this. And it's 45-minute timeline, about a half-hour timeline of what happened, and then some Q&A from me, because it was the fourth time I've seen the presentation. The other times had all been in public spaces, but to help make sure that this one, this presentation was done in a comfortable manner for the presenter, then it was just me and that person.
I actually watched it, and for our audience who's watching, I think it's an important presentation to watch. I don't have an overlay of it, but it is ld48.org.
ld48dems.org.
ld48dems.org. If you get a chance, go on and watch this presentation because it's actually well done, the way they laid out their process and their timeline and kind of some of their challenges. And I thought that when I watched it, when I was looking at it, I was trying to, when I saw that that the team had been disbanded, it felt to me, it's kind of ironic when, folks talk about people of color being loud or to whatever, but they use the vehicle of shutting you down and cutting it, dismantling the commissions and doing everything they can to control the outcomes for other people. And so this is a playbook. If it's typical, and many of us were saying this 4 years ago when there was a run for that position of mayor, because many of us, the brown and black people, were supporting Steve Fields, and we marched with him in the parades. Like, we are afraid as brown and black people of white women who gain power And once they get seated, it's so difficult to unseat them, and they can literally abuse everyone around and try to control their ascension and then the diminishment of other people around them. And so, what has actually happened since, you know, is this even legal that that mayor can do this to the commission? And what is the district doing about this kind of behavior? I mean, is this democratic
Okay.
behavior? Like,
So they when they finally got their their second to last meeting, after that, at that meeting, they were intimidated and they were told to not make any final decisions. And the city had literally brought in an outside attorney without their knowledge. And that attorney intimidated them to think if they did anything like make a final decision, that the city would sue them and they would be liable for lots of money. And this wasn't just that night; it was the entire time. But they left that meeting with a meeting scheduled for May 31st. Okay, that's the actual deadline, even though they were supposed to be done at the end of April. May 31st, they had that date. They were happy with that date. The city staff had even posted it on the website. And then that was supposed to happen on the 31st, which I don't know, may have been a Wednesday. But I believe it was the Wednesday or Thursday after Memorial Day. And on the Friday before Memorial Day, the mayor took the day off. And in that day off, it turns out she went to the media and she went to Cairo 7 and she got on Kairos. Not only did they get a note, I think about 4 p.m. on the Friday before Memorial Day, that their meeting had been canceled and they were disbanded for oh gosh, I don't even I didn't get the email, so I don't know exactly what it says, but I believe on the news the mayor said that they were breaking the rules and they were incompetent. And the rules that she was implying had to be OPMI rules, which all city council commissions, like that you're going to be making decisions about money, are under. And in those rules is don't meet with more than a quorum of people to discuss this issue, which they never had. They weren't even talking to each other. Well, when they not only were disbanded, but they were told they were incompetent, and they had worked so hard to make sure that everything was transparent, because that's really something that's important to people in my LD, that we have transparency in our LD and also in things like this. So they were bringing that to the table and they were being told that they broke rules and they were incompetent. And that's when they contacted me. I got contacted by Chandra to let them know it happened. And to hire an attorney was like a $1,500 thing. And a lot of these people that were on this commission are on fixed incomes or, budgets, and they don't have that money. And I was able to reach out to a few people I know. And there was a person that funded this attorney from our LD and paid $1,500 so that they, as a group, now they were supposedly disbanded, but they didn't really know why. Because in any example that was given by the mayor in the email, it didn't make sense to them, because it wasn't saying really any reason why they were incompetent and breaking rules. So they got a lawyer, and the lawyer said that they didn't really think that what the late mayor did was actually legal. And what they needed to do was get together and have a final meeting and go over their proposals and have some public comment and, and get together, make a decision, and file it with the clerk's office. So I believe they decided, and this was, of course, after Memorial Day weekend. So that was the days following Memorial Day. So they decided that they would have a meeting on June 8th. They let the city know. They used their city, the email that the city staff said they had to use to contact each other about anything to do with the commission. So that's what they did. And they let the city know that they didn't, that they had hired counsel, that they didn't feel that they had been disbanded legally, and they were going to have a meeting, a final meeting to make a decision on what they felt the council's salary should be. And here was the agenda. Well, I believe they were told that it was never posted. I don't even know if the city staff got back to them, But they got to the door that night at 7 p.m. and lo and behold, there was a big sign that said, "No salary commission meeting tonight," and the doors were locked. And I will tell you that a lot of times, I guess the doors for City of Redmond, City Hall, are not necessarily locked at 7 o'clock. So they held their meeting right outside City Hall. And as it turned out, there had been a lot of public comments on this commission the whole way through. The staff was holding those back. They did not get those public comments until before that second to last meeting, and like just minutes ahead of the meeting. They didn't even have a chance to go through them. The staff had been implying that the city residents did not agree with having a high salary raise. And it turns out that after reading those emails after their final meeting, which they didn't know was their final meeting, after their second to last meeting, that actually they got a lot of support from the community. And a lot of community members were astounded that the city council was paid so little money to do the job that they're required to do on over $1 billion budget. So there you go. They did it. They sent it into the city clerk, and the city council was notified that the salary commission had made their final decision. And basically, I think that that's leaving it up to the city council now, right? Are they going to look into it? Are they going to hire an attorney? Are they going to do anything about it? I don't know. I do know that part of what they asked us to do was if you watch the video, Uthman is very, very, he says that this made him feel terrible and uncomfortable, and he doesn't know if he'll ever believe a word that mayor says. And this salary commission presentation asked the 48th to ask our elected officials that have endorsed Angela Burney for city mayor, because she is running again for city mayor, to rescind their endorsements. Because they, not only the people that have been politically involved and really wanted to help make a good change, but someone who had never been politically involved, just felt so pushed down by this experience and couldn't believe that he going into this wanting to do his best and just look at the information and make a good decision. He had no idea what was going to happen. He felt very he felt the process was pretty terrible.
Did the city council actually receive the final recommendation?
So they did. I believe it was sent to them on.
I don't think so, Lisa.
Oh, okay.
Because I did
know
my due diligence before the show,
Oh.
so I'm not sure that they have. So I'm just putting that out there that I think.
Well, I will ask them if they
Yeah.
did that, because I do know they did. What they were told to do was file it with the clerk's office.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I don't know if they decided that they were going to also individually mail the city council or not. But you think that the city council needs to be informed?
I mean, that was my due diligence, so I would just,
Okay.
I'm just putting that out there. And
Thank
I'm
you.
going to, I'm going to cynically say, isn't it ironic about those who say other people are incompetent when we question theirs, right? What's that phrase that says, I am not who you think I am, you are who you think I am? What you see in me exists in you. There was quite a bit of controversy on some levels when that mayor ran, and particularly because we all witnessed an incident towards a brown woman and how a brown woman was treated. And so when you talk about Chandra's experience, it echoes what other folks have said. And so this is incredibly important, that all of us as citizens, not even of Redmond, but citizens, be paying attention to this, because what Lisa just described is, as soon as power is starting to be gotten, then the forces of keeping people out that they don't want to have out, that they don't, excuse me, that they don't want to have in, those forces come into play. And let me also challenge people to look at the qualifications of what it actually takes to run a city, right? Who's actually getting those chief executive officer jobs of cities when they themselves could be called into question about their capabilities or qualifications to actually become a CEO from sitting on a few councils and taking an East Side leadership class and then all of a sudden can propel into a CEO. That is not the plight of what brown and black people go through. And yet those are the people that are holding us back from gaining power. And we as citizens, we as brown and black people must demand better. And so, Lisa, let me bring you back because, what steps are you taking as the 48th district to deal with that issue? Because this doesn't feel democratic from my perspective about how that is being managed. Are you taking action as a legislative district about the interference of that commission and I'm going to paraphrase what I heard you describing was bullying, right? The bullying
Mhm.
of the people around who were moving this forward. What are you guys doing about this?
Well, first, I'm also a member of Democrats for Diversity and Inclusion, and that's a group of mostly Black folks who are politically active, with some allies, with some other people there, but mostly brown and Black folks, trying to get other brown and Black folks elected and uplifted in their positions. And I am going to tell you that what happened to this planning commission from people I've talked to in Kent, Bellevue, Burien, I mean, even Seattle, this was not unique. It seems like they have these commissions that are required by law, but the people that are kind of giving the framework of what is supposed to be done, they have their agenda and they want to see this planning this kind of group do their agenda. And I know people on planning commissions in 4 different cities in King County right now, and they all told me that even being on the planning commission, they feel like they are given a directive, they are given what to look at, and they don't have a lot of autonomy in going and digging deep. But what this group did is they literally looked at the statute and at the city law and everything that had to do with this commission to decide what they could and couldn't do. And this is only things that have come out to me since they got this attorney and were allowed to they actually met together for the first time because this action was wow, like so unexpected after they had finally been getting, they thought, a good relationship with the city and the staff. And so what we're trying to do is we are going to be sharing this with King County Dems and Washington State Dems. And we want to hear, I mean, I'm hoping that other people that have been in positions like this are not afraid to start speaking out and getting in touch with people and letting them know what happened to them. Because one thing the 48th has said to all of the people that we come in contact, get involved with your city, be on a planning commission. And now I've even heard back from someone who moved to Oregon from our LD that literally said when they were on a parks planning commission for Redmond, it was the same kind of behavior. That they didn't feel like they had the autonomy to do
And
anything.
look, what you're describing is everything I wrote about, right? It's every one of our experiences is that, um, I'm not going to deviate from this conversation, but even watching, my last few shows, watching what has gone down with Dr. Karen Johnson, right? As soon as we start to gain power and as soon as we start to make progress, then we have to deal with being taken down because they have never had to suffer or step aside. Now, this is important from a voting perspective because the people who, let me ask you this question, because the engine that lined up behind her, because this is a leadership problem, right? This is fundamentally a leadership issue that we have people working on behalf of all the citizens and they can't even put bread on their table every day. It is expected that people work for cheap and nothing. And the disproportionate impact to communities of color is significant. And so this issue definitely has to be tackled. And it also needs to get tackled in the House and in the Senate. Like these are important issues because we have our people working for $50,000. Nobody can live on $50 or $60,000 in the state of Washington. It's just not possible unless we're willing to live under the tree and use, honey buckets, every day to. I mean, I'm being a little smart assy, but it's real. And
Can I
so,
interject
yeah,
that a lot of people think their legislators only work when they're in session? I mean,
yeah,
if you've ever had anything you wanted to do, a piece of legislation you wanted to have, or an issue that's really bothering you, you've contacted your senator or representative about it, and it probably hasn't even been when they were in session
mm,
because their emails go on all
all
year.
the time. Yeah,
Their conversations with their constituents go on all year. And I would say that they also need to be going out to events. So do every elected official go to events in their community and they pay to go, right? They get invited to pay so that they can support these different community events. They need, they cannot do the job that they need to do in a state of that's like more than doubled in size, and I believe in 25 years, that they could do 40 years ago when they literally just did come to town and do some work in session and then maybe be able to continue on with their jobs. I will tell you, every person I know who's run for city council or legislator, and that has been a small business person, if they've won, it's been too hard and they could only stay for one term.
yeah,
And usually they lose and they are like, oh my goodness, I could not afford to have done that because right now, look and see who's representing us. And it is a bunch of retired people, which aren't necessarily bad, but the voices that need to be heard in our community are not there. We've been
correct.
doing a little bit better in our Democratic Party, at least on the west side of the state, trying to uplift the voices of people of color. But I am going to say, I think it's great, but a lot of those people also come from privileged backgrounds,
Mhm,
right? So maybe they have already always lived an upper middle class life, and that's great. But do they really understand what people who've lived in poverty and are living in poverty now are going through?
mhm,
And having been there and having growing up Native and having different types of wealth throughout my life, but always having cousins that were dirt poor. I mean, it's not unusual. You know, Natives get treated pretty bad in Washington State, and
yeah,
a Native family may rent one room with two beds and have 5 or 6 kids. And
yeah,
I'm going to tell you what, there's like about 4 or 5 kids, depending how they big they are, sleeping on the bed, and 2 or 3 on the floor. And that's because that's what we can afford. I mean, even going to a hotel is
mhm,
hard. So we want their voices on their city councils. We want the voices of the single parent that like doesn't have the time, can't afford with their 24,000, 18 to $24,000 a year to pay for childcare. And
mhm,
it's not just the city council meetings. There's so much they have to do to be ready for those meetings, and so many things they need to do. And so I think for a long time, people have not felt like their city council is doing anything for them
mhm,
because their city council wasn't. All
mhm,
they were concerned with rich people's problems because they were rich people. So
mhm.
they were concerned about what happened in their neighborhoods and nothing else. And
And
the
and or, look,
yeah,
how that engine works is,
who do you know? Who do you
people
know?
come forward, trying to make public comment, shooting down the people that are actually out there working because they don't know what these city council people are doing on behalf. I mean, it's not like, you post it online every single day. And to your point about, all the behind the scenes things that go on, the responding to constituents, the meeting to people, the coffees, the things that go on, like it's an important piece of having our voices heard is being able to have access to the people who supposedly represent us. So it's always suspect to me why we question the lower earning power, but we never challenge a personal campaign to drive the CEO's salaries up, right? Like this continues to happen in every organization I've seen and been in, that they continue to fight for the top seat and just continue to build a bigger disparity, and that's tax money paying for it. So we have control over that as citizens. We can vote them in and vote them out just as well, right?
And we have so much voice at our local level. And
Mhm,
that's why, even if it's painful, go to these city council meetings, make comments, get in touch with your city council members, find out exactly what's driving them.
mhm,
If they're holding your values, then let's see why they aren't being used.
mhm,
What kind of feedback are they getting? Um,
mhm,
because what happens is we get a brave person in there, and I'm going to use this as an example because I do not live there and do not know the situation, but I believe it's Kenmore, and I believe they had a woman of color that was elected, and that person is not running anymore. They're not running
mhm,
for a second term, and I want to hear that story. I want to know, how uncomfortable is it? I mean, literally in the 48th, we have a young woman of color who is running for Seattle Hospital District 2, position 6. And that is encompasses 5 different cities, lots of things to do. And everybody on that board is right now old, white, a former doctor, a former lawyer, or a former administrator of some kind. And the first question I had to ask her is, you do know what you're running for. You do know that when you win, because we want you to win, that you will be sitting in a meeting with 5 old white men every month. And she was like, yes. And she has really good reasons for doing what she's doing. She's a union member. She's a mom of some little kids, and very confident. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say names, but I am making sure that she has connections with every city council member who is endorsed by Democrats in the places she needs to go doorbelling, right? And I am making sure there is another woman of color running for Redmond City Council who's not been involved in the ecosystem and been on the planning commission in Redmond, and is basically an outsider. And I'm really happy that we endorsed her. I didn't know anything about her, so I reached out to her, found out a little about her story. She's awesome,
mhm.
right? And she said that when she tells people, they're like, "So how much you get paid for that?" She's like, $18,000 a year, so I can spend 20 to 30 hours a week minimum, doing my job. They are just like, you are crazy. But this person has a strong need for public service.
Mhm. Well,
So we need
it's
to speak
definitely
up.
it's been a barrier, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and they
Absolutely.
all know it, which is why they are taking that power because they are either wealthy or white or have husbands that bring in checks, all the things
Yeah.
that go on to them. Lisa, in our last few minutes, can you talk about aren't you taking some action to have that mayor's endorsement stripped from the rest of the Democratic Party in order to prohibit someone like that who is, you know, I mean, I'll let you talk to it. Are you guys taking
So,
action with that?
so the first thing that we were able to do when this presentation was given to the 48th on June 14th, part of what they asked as part of this presentation was for us to ask these elected officials who have endorsed this mayor, from Suzanne Del Bene to every single one of our legislators in the 45th and 48th, because that's where Redmond is, to rescind their endorsement of this person for mayor, because not we as the 48th want to see this person censored by the Democratic Party. And the next step is going up to the King County Dems and getting this presentation to them, which will happen in July, because the meeting this month is for endorsement votes. But I have forwarded this information to the chair of King County, and I will be forwarding it now after this meeting to the chair of the Washington State Democrats, because this is some conversation that we need to have. Why did these people from different backgrounds all decide that as a group of 5, because like I said, there was the one guy that never showed up, and then a woman who quit showing up after about the second or third meeting. Why did those 5 all decide that they really want a strong message? Because, and they are all from, definitely different backgrounds. And so it's a very strong message asking these elected people that are elected politicians to rescind their endorsement of someone who is still, thought of highly in the Democratic Party because they are good at raising money, right, for themselves and others. It is really hard asking them, but it was a unanimous vote. And it was, we had a conversation. I was chair. I said nothing. The membership had a conversation for about an hour about whether we could do this or do something a little bit less extreme. And the people that were on that committee said, this is what we want. And we decided to honor that, because all we can do as people in any position of power is try to help
Yeah.
those who are trying to take it. And we are going by their direction, but now it will be, I think in the 48th, we are really upset by this. And I am just going to say there were members in the 48th that had no idea what had happened because these people weren't allowed to talk for over 3 months, and they were not happy. So I do know that this is a conversation that salary commission wants to get out to everybody in Washington state. And
Well,
I just want to make sure that we let you know we're trying to do it here, and we want it to go to everywhere. We don't want it just for here.
So, Lisa, look, that's why I want to air this show. We will definitely be pushing this show out far and wide. Thank you for coming on to this with us tonight and talking about this. Is vitally important that our community pays attention to this, because if we don't pay attention to this, and there is an election going on right now to reelect the person who's trying to hold that back, if we as voters don't start taking a stand to this atrocity of keeping people down, keeping oppressing people in a state and in one of the wealthiest places in the country to live. If we can't tackle it here, we're never going to get it tackled in other places. So I just want to thank you and the 48th District for carrying this torch forward, because it does take bold action, valiant actions in order to drive change. And this is a very necessary conversation. So, Lisa, I hope you don't mind if I check back in with you in the next 3 months so we can see the progress on it, because we definitely want to watch what's happening there. So thank you for coming on with me this evening and talking about this. To our audience tonight who joined me here tonight to listen to this conversation, I appreciate that you came on and listened. You can understand why this is so important. This is a part of the power structure that has to be tackled, changed, and remove the people that are not supporting us, the people that want to keep everyone at bay while they themselves prosper. So again, thank you all for joining me this evening. I do look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday. So have a good evening, everybody.
Half that up in sacks, I favor black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody.